Got my coffee and today's guest here with me, so we're ready to roll. I'm Michael Hanf, Executive Partner at Taival Advisory. Welcome to our Circular Coffee Break podcast, where we will casually be talking about everything circular and beyond. We hope the podcast is interesting and insightful and provides new perspectives for you. If you would like to provide feedback, have improvement ideas or suggestions, please leave us a comment or drop us a note at info@taival.com. And please remember to subscribe so that you keep up to date on future episodes. My guest today has a long history in circular economy and environmental sustainability. His stated target is to cut global emissions by 1 gigaton during his career. We will get back to that hopefully later. He holds an MSc in chemistry from TKK, and he started his career as research chemist at VTT. That was in 2000, and since then his profile actually counts 15 different roles that he has been holding. He is the father of Neste's bioplastics, biochemicals and chemical recycling program, the author of Böru's Plastic to Bio concept, and had a short stint as the business development director at Dudson Activity Park. And that's something we will definitely come back later in this podcast, as it sticks out in the CV. He has been the principal at AFRU in the circular bioeconomy sector from 2018 to 21, and the CCO for Woodley until very recently, January 23. In addition to these roles, he's a micro-angel with investments in 9 bioeconomy companies, and I understand that number is changing continuously, so that this number is going up and down as we speak. Circular economy and green tech startups. He has been an advisor, co-founder and board member for companies like Camupac, a digital deposit system for reusable products, Reciclo, a company looking at chemical recycling, River Recycle, offering sustainable river cleaning services, and Woodley, providing wood-based, carbon-neutral and recyclable packaging material. And if that wouldn't be enough, on top of that, he is also the founder and CEO of November Consulting, where he's looking at industrializing degrowth, another topic we will be coming back. So I think we will have a very long list of things to talk about today. I'm looking forward to jump into all of these in today's episode. And thank you for joining me on the show today, Tomi Nyman.
Thanks, Michael. It's a pleasure to join the podcast. It's really great.
Perfect. A long list of things you've been doing in your career, very much linked to circularity and environmental sustainability, and your set target naturally links directly to that. But let's maybe start with the obvious. How did you end up becoming the business development director of Dudson Activity Park? And maybe for the listeners that are not familiar, Dudson Activity Park is a company with a number of indoor activity parks, basically for all ages, where you can, do crazy things. I've been there with my kids, and for some events, it's really a place where you can be active in unexpected ways.
You can test your limits.
So how did you end up there?
Well, that was after my 5-year stint at Neste.
Yeah.
I joined Neste to initiate their bioplastics, biochemicals, and eventually chemical recycling programs. And after 5 years, I had basically achieved certain milestones that I felt were in the scope of doing in regards to business development and strategy-wise. And I felt that it's a good time to do something else.
Yeah.
I left the company, and at that time I started to think that I've been working for 15 years in the industry, been flying around the world, joining meetings, sleeping nights in hotels, and what had I missed? I had missed doing sports. So I started developing my own concept relating to small indoor activity parks, really small ones, around 400 square meter. And what happened was that when I was looking for funding, I called a few friends here and there, and one of them happened to be on the board of the Dudson company. And he said that this sounds very interesting. Let's talk to Jarno.
Yeah.
And then I had a discussion with Jarno Laasala and eventually with the CEO of Dudson Activity Parks. And I started as the business development director there. Joined the company with the aim to develop more parks, with the aim to grow the company, and that's how it started.
Cool. And it's definitely a good way to get a different perspective, I think.
Yeah. I was 42 when I started making vaults. So.
Interesting. I mean, the paths life takes you to, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, but I mean, outside of that, you have been throughout your career. You have been working a lot around plastics, like plastic production, circulation, plastic alternatives, and you're arguably one of the leading influencers in Europe in that topic. Now, plastics is everywhere. It's a very important material. We're using it in our everyday life. Just looking around here, you cannot imagine a world without plastics. At the same time, it's basically creating a lot of problems and a lot of harm on the environment, animals, water, the planet as a whole, so to say. Now, let me ask you a maybe not so trivial question. What does it take for us to solve the plastic equation? The plastic problem, if you want. I want to state it negatively. Meaning, from your experience, what are some of the best practices? What are some of the good things you've seen? Before we switched on the recording, we talked a lot about the fact that the world has come a long way since we met the first time and since we all have started to work in this area. I mean, what's your experience? What do you see out there, and where do we still have our homework to do?
Yeah. I think there are two crucial things we need to change. One is funding, and one is incineration. In the Plastics to Bio concept I wrote earlier, I calculated a rough CapEx requirement. It's not only in infrastructure but also in education, of about 50 billion euros or dollars per year that is required to change the system. That would enable the education, the collection, the sorting, the building of recycling units, and the incorporation of bio-based feedstock into the plastic stream. Building that system will take 10 years or 15 years with that $50 billion investment per year. But when we achieve it, gradually we will reach decoupling fossil feedstock. We will be using primarily recycling as the tool, and recycled plastics, recycled materials as the feedstock. And we will save more than $100 billion a year on the feedstock cost. So that makes it affordable. That makes it makes the investment worth it. And it also shows that it doesn't really matter if it's 10 years or 15 years to achieve it, because we will save so much money eventually. Incineration is essential because we have built, at least in Europe, in Finland, for example, we've built massive incineration units that are now operating on plastics. We are burning all the plastics that we should recycle. We're generating a lot of CO2. If we would divert that plastic to recycling, we would not be concerned about the. Just yesterday, the head of Finnish Plastics Industry Association, he said that, or the federation, he said that there is not enough plastics for recycling, and the reason for that is incineration. Many countries are still also, especially outside Europe, they're still shipping material to developing countries, and that must stop. There's massive amounts of feedstock in the developing countries that could be repurposed.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's a multifaceted problem. Naturally, I mean there's not one solution there. When we've been working now in the plastic space, what we've been hearing often is the use cases for recycled plastics are not there yet. So there's not enough use cases for plastics, but there's also a problem with mechanical recycling, for example, in the way we collect plastics at the moment, because you cannot use the recycled plastics for all the purposes anymore. Once you create mixed plastics out of those, and then you talk about chemical recycling, you talk about other solutions which are in development and which might get us there at some point, but as you said, which require investment, which require focus. The other side, I think, and that's maybe also a very interesting topic, you mentioned education. And again, we talked earlier about the fact when the pandemic started, everyone said like, we cannot reduce travel because the world will end. And then the pandemic came and we stopped travel and the world is still there. And since last year, the energy crisis has been hitting us due to the horrible war in the Ukraine, and everyone said, okay, without energy we cannot survive. Now we are reducing energy for obvious reasons, and we are still continuing. The same is true with consumption. The same is true with recycling and all of this. How do you see that we can change people's mindset in recycling, in basically having this mindset of, I need to be part of the solution, I need to accept inconvenience? Because I think that very often is the problem. It's the inconvenience that we don't want to take that keeps us away from doing the right things.
It's actually really much a mindset issue.
Yeah.
We think it's an inconvenience, even when actually solutions might be more simple, more easy than we think. If I would now write Plastics to Bio again, I would definitely incorporate reuse as 50% of the solution. Because reuse, extending the life of products beyond the current average lifetime, is the fastest and the easiest way to reduce material consumption. If you now look at me, the white shirt I'm wearing is 12 years old. The gray shirt, which is pretty similar to yours, this one is over 15 years old.
Yeah.
My jeans, I repaired them this morning. It took me 5 minutes to repair my broken jeans. It would have taken me about 2 hours to go shopping and buy new jeans.
Yeah.
So the inconvenience, we think that, let's just buy something new, is convenient. But on the contrary, we spend less time and money reusing and repairing things.
Yeah, no, I see your point. I think it's a very good point. At the same time, let me give you an example. I had an old stereo that I wanted to repair, and I was driving around the city to find a place to repair that. And every shop I went to, the answer I got was like, it's more expensive to repair it. Just buy a new one off the shelf over here. So I think it's also that we're not costing in a lot of the cost that we're creating with that. But it's a very good point. I mean, if you want it, as the last couple of years have shown, if you want to achieve something, if you want to do something, then it's definitely possible.
A few years back, I wrote another concept called end of linear economy, where I suggested a 0.1% monthly increase on interest rates. Now, we have actually achieved that currently in Europe, but it became an abrupt issue now. If we would do it systematically, and I've been promoting this to basically all the leading world economy banks, all the national banks, and I've been discussing with the UK Treasury about this, for example. The idea there is that if we do it gradually, the consumers, the industry, businesses, companies, organizations, they gradually will realize that in 5 years' time, the interest rates will make linear buying new stuff all the time, it will be very expensive.
Yeah.
And then they will start to think, what kind of services will be needed to change this so that everything doesn't become so expensive? They will start offering reuse, they will start offering repair, refurbishing, that kind of services. Also for electronics. I was talking to about this issue with my wife last year when our dishwasher broke, and we bought a new one. We bought a new one with a long guarantee, and the seller said that it should last you for 20 years. Mm-hmm. I contacted the CEO of this German company, and with a calculation that if you were to do this with a system that you don't actually sell the device, but you lease it, and the lease price per month includes, let's say, 5 repairs during 20 years, it would be cheaper for the individual. You, as a producer, maintain the ownership of the hardware. It comes back to you after 20 years, and you can still refurbish it after that. And the CEO said they are piloting that in Germany. That kind of models will definitely come in the electronics sector, where the hardware stays as it is, but you just change the software, for example.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think what we will see is also other aspects of that. So in some of our projects, we've been discussing with customers about the fact that recycled material in many areas is very difficult to come by. Yeah. So if you can make sure that your own products are coming back to you at the end of life, and you can basically harvest the resources, harvest the materials, that will be a huge question going forward, as a lot of these materials are not available anymore in that context. So I think there's a lot talking for that. At the same time, I don't know. I don't remember exactly anymore what car manufacturer it was, but it was a CEO of a huge car manufacturing company who said, our refurbishing plant is the most profitable we have. And if you think about it, it's logical that it is that way, because you're selling the refurbished product maybe at a discount, but still at a very high price, without having all the production cost, having all of the cost factors that you normally have. So it should be a no-brainer. In many cases, it unfortunately still is not in that sense. You are involved with some startups or growth companies that are in this space. How do you see that area developing? The development of new solutions, of new approaches, specifically on that intersection between startups, growth companies that are moving very fast but don't necessarily have the possibility to scale globally to a wider audience, and on the other side, the CEO you talk to, who most likely has a lot of legacy business that they have to take care of, which very often scares them away from testing new business models, testing new approaches and services in the market. How do you see that?
Yeah, well, when it comes to the startup scene, they are, of course, often looking at disrupting regular businesses with new solutions, with new technologies. And there I see that there's a lot of interest and pressure also from the big brand owners that things have to change. Consumers will not accept single-use materials packaging for very long in many applications. So applications where you are able to employ reused packaging, you need to be able to recover the material somehow. And that's where you come with different kinds of return schemes, buyback schemes, digital deposits that Camopag, for example, is working on. And these become more and more interesting to the industry. And when looking at that scene, we've come across players that are actually also leasing plastics. So you don't need to buy the granulate, but you lease the material. And then you don't, as a startup, you're short of cash often. So you don't need to invest 50,000 euros or 100,000 euros in plastics, but you just lease it with a monthly payment. And your own operations are lighter to scale in that way.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now let's maybe switch to another topic. Before today's session, you sent me a message with an image and a note. The image said, industrializing degrowth. And the note basically said, let's talk about this on the podcast. So let's do that. Let's talk about this. When you talk about industrializing degrowth, what does that mean for you? What does that concept mean? And what are the steps required And related to that, what are opportunities and downsides we might see from that?
Yeah. I started to think about degrowth about 5 years ago when I left Neste, and started to really think, what do I need besides what have I missed? And I started to reduce my own consumption.
Mm-hmm.
And during my career, my maximum salary level was in 2010, 2011,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of period. And since then, I've cut my salary by 60%.
Mm-hmm.
I still have a good life.
Mm-hmm.
I have a family of 4 people, 2 teenagers. We have a lot of needs in the family.
Mm-hmm.
We have a house built in 2012. I'm paying my mortgage, but still we manage.
Yeah.
We've learned that we don't need that much.
Mm-hmm.
We actually have excess. So how do we take that to the next level? And for the last 5 years, I've thought a lot about different systemic changes.
Mm-hmm.
And I've come to the conclusion that basically all smart people eventually realize that reducing consumption is a must.
Mm-hmm.
Degrowth makes sense. We've learned from the pandemic, as you said, we've learned from the war,
Mm-hmm.
that we adjust as human beings and as national economies. We can restructure the way we work, the industry, the economy, and the only way to do it is to attract the industry to scale it. Degrowth is a word which many people are afraid of. They think that it will take a lot from them.
Yeah.
They will not be able to do things anymore. Now, actually, there are good examples that talk about the contrary. There is, for example, a small town in Denmark, Sønderborg, where the city council was provided the opportunity to optimize the energy in the city with a three-year payback time.
Yeah.
And people are now actually making money with that. The energy savings allow them to save money on a local basis. If we start reusing things, if we start recycling things more efficiently on an industrial level, it will mean that we don't spend so much money on materials. We don't exploit natural resources. We don't spoil the forest. We don't spoil the environment, the nature. And companies that will take this as part of their strategy into an industrial level will become more competitive. And they will gain market share. Because if you are able to reduce consumption and make your own consumers wealthier, you are a future leader of the industry. And once the industry starts to compete with each other, degrowth starts to grow. So that makes it really intriguing to see how far can we actually take it. Now, if we take it on a global level, the economy needs to be restructured. Because if everyone saves a lot of money, everyone becomes rich, then we have excess money. What do we do with that? That will cause monetary issues. So the global economy needs to be adjusted. But I leave that to the economists to think about. That's kind of their problem.
It's a very interesting concept. We actually developed a circular business assessment together with WWF Germany. And one of the questions we're asking is, what do you as a company do to reduce consumption of your customers? And that did lead to quite interesting discussions with the companies we have been doing the assessment for, because the common mindset of a company is like, I have to sell more products. I have to basically make my customers consume more in order for me to be successful. Which I fully agree with you is not really the case. I mean, you see companies nowadays offering repair services, refurbishing services, and they're as successful. They're making even more money. They're even more profitable. Yeah. Their revenue might be lower, but the profitability goes up because they can optimize that when they offer services or when they offer refurbishing.
And they gain market share.
Yes,
and that is more important than just revenue.
Yes. No, absolutely. I think it's back to something you said earlier. It's a mindset. It's a mindset thing. And one thing, and it would be interesting to get your take on that as well. I mean, a lot of the things we're talking about are systemic. So one company can do something, one consumer can do something, but unless you basically anchor it in changes in the system, it will not have the large effect, and it might just fizzle out at some point in time. And the big question is, how do we drive that systemic change? How do we get everyone on board, specifically in a divided world, like what we're seeing in, be it the US, be it Brazil, but also in France and in many other places where differing opinions are not just differing opinions, like in the old days where you would argue over a beer, but where there's really a huge divide between how people see the world. How do you see that? What's your thinking on that, specifically when you think about degrowth, about these new systemic approaches to our life, basically to our world as it functions today?
Last year, I started working with several psychologists on the topic. I was building a group to discuss the idea of human mind in climate change. Mm-hmm. How do we adjust people's thinking? How do we, sometimes if we push people to make a decision, if we force them, they will reject. Mm-hmm. They will fight back. Direct influencing doesn't always work. That's why we have things like marketing. Mm-hmm. We gradually make people realize themselves that this is a good thing. Mm-hmm. We need indirect influencing, where marketing plays a big role, to make people aware that, by the way, repairing it just makes so much more sense than buying a new car every 3 years. So it's I think we underutilize the power of psychology. Regulations do their part. That is a way of forcing, but you get a lot of objection. When we get people to make the decision themselves, they are much more committed, and that's where this kind of. I was talking to about 50 people in the spring last year, individually and in small groups, and we had really good, interesting discussions about the topic. But we didn't really come to a conclusion how to really crack the bolt. But one thing that we discussed was culture. In big companies, for example, like Neste, there's a lot of discussion about safety culture. Why don't we incorporate the idea of climate or nature culture into companies and organizations? How do we make the world better in that respect? It starts with small things. But once it's in your brain, once it's in your spine, it becomes natural to you. And you start avoiding unsustainable practices.
Yeah, absolutely, and I mean that's one of the things we're seeing. I mean, we've been I think both been working in this space now for a while, and if you go back, I don't know, 5-10 years, the mindset was very different. Towards many of these topics, where you basically were a tree hugger, where you were like a green fanatic, if you would talk about these topics. Nowadays, it's boardroom topics. You see many of the organizations that you would have never thought would talk about these topics, basically embracing these topics. So from that point of view, I think that mindset shift is happening as we speak. Is it happening as fast as we would like it to happen? We can argue about that. But we're getting there. So I think a lot of the things we talked about, a lot of the things you have been talking about in the concept that you were referring to, the plastics to bio concept, already quite some time ago. I think we're now getting to the point where they're becoming reality. Now, the title on your LinkedIn page, I mentioned it earlier, is basically to cut emissions by 1 gigaton during your career. Now, how close are you? What are the things you're aiming to do in the next steps of your career to reach or to even overachieve that target?
Now, the concepts I've written so far add up to more than 50 gigatons a year in terms of annual CO2 savings. Or it's not only savings, but it also includes creation of carbon capture solutions, natural based, basically. Now, it's impossible to say if I've exceeded 1 gigaton, when I will exceed, and so on. But I will continue talking about these topics, about the concepts. I'm creating new ones in the field of not only bioeconomy, circular economy, but also in terms of regular economy, like the linear economy model. I think sectors I'm still looking forward to enter are sectors that are consuming a lot of natural resources, including, let's say, textiles. That's very interesting. Composites.
Yeah.
The food sector is definitely a must.
Yeah.
One of the concepts I wrote includes the reduction of meat consumption and the reduction of food waste. If we reduce both of them by 50%, we end up releasing so much land, about between 2 and 3 billion hectares in the world. If we reforest that, we can capture in 20, 30 years' time 50 gigatons of CO2 every year. Now, I've been promoting that to the large retail organizations, the food wholesalers in the world, and many of them are focusing on that, primarily on the food waste side for the time being. The meat consumption is taking a bit longer to adjust the way of thinking in the consumer's world, but it's definitely something that's growing. There are many countries in the world where we are eating excess amounts of animal protein. We need about, depending on the calculations, around let's say 70 grams of protein for men like us. So it's really, we don't need to eat 300-400 grams of meat every day because we get protein from other foodstuff as well. We often think that protein only comes from meat.
Yeah.
When there is also in cereals, there's proteins in carrots.
Yeah,
it's small amounts, but it adds up.
And I've been listening to a BBC documentary very recently about precision fermentation, which was a new concept to me. But it's about basically how can you artificially, in quotation marks, produce proteins, and that is a very interesting alternative as well. And naturally, pros and cons, like with everything, and they go through that in the BBC documentary very well. Yeah. So I would highly recommend that to everyone who's interested in the topic. But there are alternatives out there currently.
Yeah, we have Solar Foods here in Finland making proteins out of thin air.
Yes.
I'm still waiting for a big launch of a company working on circular economy of food.
Yeah. Basically,
we have, if we think about feces and urea, we have all we need to produce proteins and fats and sugars. Of course, hygiene is something that needs to be taken care of, but there are processes.
Yeah.
You can ultra-heat treat, you can do other things to make it hygienic.
Yeah, absolutely. Very good. The coffee is empty, and it's time to wrap up this episode of the Circular Coffee Break. Thanks a lot, Tomi, for joining me today. Really interesting topics, and I could continue the conversation for hours.
Likewise.
So let's see. Maybe you come back one of these days, and we jump into more detail on some of the topics.
Excellent. Thanks, Michael.
So quickly, before we wrap up, if you have any comments, ideas, suggestions, please let us know. Leave a comment either on the podcasting platform of your choice or send us a note at info@taival.com. We're always looking forward to new ideas and insights. We're still learning as we move forward and continuously adjusting, so eager to hear from all of you. Also, please remember to subscribe to stay in the loop on new episodes. New episodes will drop on a 2-weekly rhythm. And we have a long list of very interesting guests lined up for the coming shows. So really looking forward to those. I'm looking forward to seeing all of you here on the Circular Coffee Break.